This is the Tree of Life, Season 23, Chapter 3. In this episode, we will be talking about frequency modulation and the relationship between coupling within a group and the period corresponding to the substitutionary structure in a sequential substitution event. To begin, in general, the tightness of the digital stream for any individual actor is a reflection of the degree of emotional coupling in any closed group. That means, for example, that the ability to shift or pivot between hierarchies, orient around objects, is limited by the tightness of the stream. So what causes this tightness? The answer comes out of our discussion of sequential substitution events. In these events, in preference shifting, we see the transformation of a digital structure at the beginning of reverse substitution to an analog structure at the end, before becoming a digital structure again at the conclusion of the substitution event. Through the analog structure, which has substitutionary impulses, we see this pivoting between substitutionary sets. But it is also true that reverse substitution, with no terminal negation, also produces shifts in behavior mediated by emotional coupling. That is, the incoming consciousness acts out the acquiescence and thereby integrates the impulse for the outgoing consciousness. The difference between these two shifts is the first represents some degree of agency in the mind of the subject. The second is an automatic process pursuant to tautological priority. Thus, it may be that the frequency of these transitions between digital structures, in the substitutionary structures between them, represent the capacity of a mind to remain intellectually autonomous. But that is not the whole story. For we see that when these substitutionary structures are more frequent, we also note a decrease in emotional coupling in the group as a whole. Thus, to some degree preference shifting through reverse substitution represents a modulating influence on emotional coupling in the group as a whole. Likewise, we see that nature abhors a vacuum, and consequently, it is not in the interest of the group for these transitionary periods to become more abundant. We saw that acquiescence is ultimately compelled in the sequential substitution event by the incoming consciousness acting upon the subject. Thus, the same process that permits this agency also enables preference shifting. But there is a countervailing force in the interests of the group and a natural process, which limits the frequency of these substitutionary structures. If you imagine that we are talking about a set of digital structures with phase linking, emotional coupling, and you imagine that that phase linking manifests as the tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel, and you suppose that the tautological flow preserves the coherence of the waveform representing many minds, and that the decoherence caused by the negation at the end of the reverse substitution represents decoherence as a partial measurement, and mindful of the fact that the analog structure is affirmational to distinct substitutionary impulses, then it is possible to see that the duration of the analog transitionary period during sequential substitution modulates the phase linking coupling in the group as a whole. This means that the frequency of these transitionary structures reflects decoherence rates. Likewise, since the substitutionary structure represents distinct impulses in distinct phases, it is possible to see that the modulation of emotional coupling within the group involves the substitutionary structure acting as a kind of quantum switch between coupling of distinct impulses within the group. Not only do each of these substitutionary structures modulate coupling, they each do so for two sets corresponding to two impulses. That's the end of the podcast for today.